Well, welcome to the show. The horrendous act of violence witnessed this past Sunday is yet another reminder that evil does exist. Our country is once again reeling from a senseless act of terror, and investigators are still struggling to find a motive for this killer's actions. Jim, what do we know about a possible motive today, which is Wednesday, October 4th?
Yeah, we don't know a whole lot, Ron. And I mean, from all the reports that I've heard, there were no red flags. He did send the girlfriend away, apparently, prior to committing this act. There were no red flags when he bought his guns. There were just no red flags. And I mean, you know, this guy was in his 60s. Doesn't fit what you would normally picture as somebody who is radicalized, although that question is being asked. I don't understand it.
Henry, it started back, this particular venue and the entertainment was announced in February.
It's an annual event, so he at least had some idea of when it was going to take place. Planning it out, but I mean, if we look at how meticulous he was, how he was able to smuggle in over 20 weapons into his room, how he was able to smuggle in, I think someone said 5 suitcases worth of ammo into his rooms. He had a lot of this planned out, how he had the suite chosen, that he had 2 different angles of attack in line of sight to the venue. So there's a lot of pre-planning on what's going on with this, and whether he was, I don't know if he was radicalized or not. I'm not going to dare to posture that because I think it's too early. I think our government's learning some things of what's going on, but they are playing it very close to the vest. We may not know. If he wasn't someone who was online very much and corresponded with people or let his feelings be known across Facebook, I just think it's wrong to attribute something to him without knowing all the facts.
Jim, have you heard anything about he set up in another venue back a couple weeks ago, looking over another area that there was outside entertainment?
So I heard a rumor about that. I don't know whether that's true or not.
They showed the hotel today. So
Okay.
they were able to show where the other venue was. So was that a dry run?
It certainly would appear so. Again, as Henry said, I hate to judge before all the facts are in, but one could make that jump fairly easily.
Henry, who was Stephen Paddock? I know we don't know who he was, but who was he?
I mean,
where did he get started?
You sit back and you say, well, his father was on the FBI's most wanted list, but he was a successful professional in accounting. He worked at a number of companies. He, did video, maybe it was video poker, but he gambled big stake hands, $1,000 a hand on video poker. Has a Filipino girlfriend who actually became nationalized in Australia.
64 years old.
He's mature. He doesn't fit what we would consider the cookie cutter profile of someone who would take actions such as this.
And his brother reported that while he had owned a handgun and a rifle, he was not an avid gun person. He had no military background where he had a lot of experience with weapons.
But yet he had 40-some weapons.
And he made significant purchases over the last year. I think it was about 30-plus weapons in the last year. So something, you would say probably something occurred in his life over the last year that made a wire start to short out in his brain.
Didn't he work for the IRS for a period of years? I think I saw he worked for the IRS. He lived different places, and when I first heard that he lived in Mesquite, Nevada, I thought, Texas, of course, Mesquite,
Right.
Texas, because I've been to Mesquite. He lived in Mesquite, Texas, too. So he did have a place before he
also
lived
had
in
a place
Mesquite.
in Florida. He has a place in Reno, Nevada.
Yes.
So he had a lot of real estate investments. By the records, they portray him as a fairly well-off individual. But really, people who are his neighbors, they didn't see anything that would say, oh, well, there's something wrong with him. The gun stores didn't see anything.
Does this start up a copycat thing now of older people?
Yeah, I don't think so.
You don't think?
No, I don't.
You don't think there's older people that's upset with what's going on in the
Well,
world?
I think there are older people that are upset, but I don't think necessarily it's going to start a copycat. I think predictably it's going to start a big issue of more gun control and those arguments on the political side, which it already has, and I get that. And frankly, I'm not smart enough to say what needs to happen. I mean, what do I see the need for anyone to have an automatic weapon, whether it's actual automatic or this bump thing that he had? No, I don't. What do you use that for? I mean, where does the Second Amendment stop? What weapon is too much weapon for us to allow the citizenry to have? Because, if you want to talk about a militia and rising up against an oppressive government, the oppressive government, if it's the United States, has a nuclear weapon. I don't think we're gonna, with all the guns in the world.
Henry, what do you think of the victims here? What's going to happen to the victims? And you have the victims, but then you have the families, and then you have the survivors that was in that 23,000 group of people, that the heroic efforts to save lives were just totally unmatched. How do we deal with all that? How do they deal with it?
We go beyond just the people who were there. Okay, we go to the people who were service and support personnel who ran into the line of fire. We saw bravery that I would only hope that if I was confronted with that, I would be brave enough to do that and stand up and support people like that. This shows character of what a human being is, not just an American, but what a human being is. Okay, they ran to the fire for the people that perished, and we had several local people who died in this action. One in Martinsburg, one up in I believe around the Carlisle-Shippensburg area.
Yes.
There was a young lady from Arundel County who is in a coma right now who took a bullet. You can't imagine what those losses are like, because it's sudden. It's not something that you prepare for. So the amount of stress and burden that's placed upon those families, the only thing we can do as a community is try to support them, as a nation try to support them. But does that create a militant group saying, hey, we need more gun control? Does this create I hope it creates a national discussion on responsibility. That's what I hope for. I don't know if we can really have a discussion on gun control, because everyone is their heels are so dug in. But for these individuals, they have an enormous loss and sacrifice in their life that now they have to find some way to soothe it.
So, Jim, you see then that tragedy can bring out the best in people. Is that what we're saying?
It can. And, it's interesting. You were talking about the survivors earlier. One of the headlines I saw in one of the newspapers that I was looking at online was a picture of this gentleman, and his quote was, "Why did I get to live?" He was sad because he wasn't taken, that he didn't take somebody else's place and let them live and him die, which I think is an interesting, again, you talk about the bravery of people in stressful situations. You talk about empathy. You talk about our ability as a nation to come together in times of horrific tragedy like this. I think the stories that you have seen, the lady, there was a lady that apparently stayed with a dying man for an extended period of time, had no idea who this person was, just knew that he needed comfort and support, and stood there with him. And there's dozens of stories like that I've read. So I think it speaks a lot to what we can do as a nation when we take off our political blinders and start working for the betterment of the people around us.
Well, Henry, that brings us to the inevitable. How's this going to impact gun purchases? And how about gun legislation and other issues? What do you see happening?
One thing was that he had what they call a bump stock, I believe, right. And that enabled his armament to act like it was an automatic weapon. Well, I Googled, probably I'm on someone's watch list now, but I Googled, and this can be 3D printed.
And you have a 3D printer.
I have not. I refuse to print 3D weaponry. I'm sorry. Okay, but this can be 3D printed, which means it's already out.
Yeah.
So the genie's out of the bottle. So now what can we do? One is, I think, teach gun ownership responsibility. I think that's always an important item that is, this fella, he was one incredibly lucky shot. From all accounts, he's not very experienced with guns, but he is hitting people at 2/3 of a mile away. Now, guaranteed, he had 30,000 people in a fishbowl, but he was hitting people from quite a distance. And
Yeah, well, he was sighted in. He had weapons to go up from 400 to 500 yards, so he did. He was there. As you talk about that, I'm going to take a little different approach. A lot of people talk about the NRA. Did a little research today. Do you know that the Gun Owners of America, the organization's bigger than the NRA? Jews for the Preservation of Firearms is bigger. The National Association for Gun Rights is bigger. And the Second Amendment Sisters all are ranked ahead of the NRA.
well, the NRA has a better lobby.
As we start to talk, why don't we bring this gun legislation? So they'll throw a token thing and have a legislation. Why don't we bring everybody together and bring them down to the White House? The good president, he wanted to take on the NFL. Why doesn't he get all the gun organizations together to make a better America? Instead of fighting each other, instead of trying to legislate our way, which we're not going to do with gun control, the one guy said today, well, why? It doesn't matter how many guns. He said, you've got 2 cars. What's the matter how many guns a person has? Why can't we bring all of these people together to see how we can solve our issue?
If we think about it, this gentleman could have armed a small militia himself.
He did.
Okay? I mean,
Militia of one.
yeah, a militia of one, but 47 different weapons? When I can't say when enough is enough. I have 2 hands. I guess I'm capable of using 2 trigger fingers or whatever. But honestly, what is the limit? When I know I have a friend who owns about 18 hunting rifles. Now he's only going to be shooting 1 at a time. But where is the limit? I'm not criticizing for it, and I'm not going out against the people's rights to bear arms. But common sense says somewhere there is a line that we have to find. But when you set that line, there's going to be people who want to do it are going to still do it.
And our other point right now is we're out of time on this block. What was legal in Maryland a week ago may not be now. What do we mean? Join us in 3 minutes for that report.